A 9-year-old boy hasn't spoken in 7 months. Not to his mother, not to his father, not to the therapist they drive him to every Tuesday at 4:15 p.m., not to his teacher, his friends, the school counselor, the grief specialist, the pediatrician who shined a light in his mouth and said his vocal cords were fine. 7 months of silence from a boy who used to talk so much, his older brother would put a pillow over his own face at dinner and say, "Emmett, please, 5 minutes. Just give me 5 minutes of quiet." The older brother's name was Nolan. He was 14. He died in a car accident on a Wednesday in March. Passenger seat, a friend's older sister driving. Black ice on Route 9 outside Keene, New Hampshire. The car hit a guardrail. Nolan was gone before the ambulance arrived. Emmett was at school when it happened. He was in the middle of telling his friend Parker a story about a turtle he'd seen in the creek behind their house. He never finished the story. He hasn't told one since. 7 months later, a 140-pound Dogo Argentino with a bite history and a body like a white refrigerator will lie on a bedroom floor and do something so simple that it will make Emmett's mother slide down the hallway wall and sit on the floor with her hand over her mouth. But that's not where we start. We start where we always start, with a dog nobody wanted. His name was Koda, 140 pounds of pure white, every inch of him. No spots, no patches, just white. The kind of white that looks almost blue in certain light, like snow at dusk. His head was enormous, wider than a dinner plate, or with a jaw that could exert 500 pounds of pressure per square inch, and usually did nothing more strenuous than hold a tennis ball with absurd gentleness. His eyes were light brown, almost gold, set deep under a heavy brow that made him look like he was perpetually thinking about something he wasn't going to tell you. His ears had been cropped close, too close, probably not by a vet, and the edges were uneven, which gave him a look that most people interpreted as menacing, and that Frank at the shelter said was actually just his face. When he walked, his shoulders rolled, a slow, deliberate gait, like a man in no hurry carrying something heavy. When he breathed, you could hear it from across the room, a deep, steady pull, like bellows in a blacksmith shop. Dogo Argentinos were bred in Argentina in the 1920s to hunt wild boar and puma. That's the part people know. The part they don't know, the part that changes everything about this story, is that Dogos were also bred to work in packs, which means they were bred to read other dogs' emotions, to respond to distress, to position their bodies between danger and the pack member who needed protection. They don't guard property, they guard beings. And when a Dogo decides you're part of his pack, he doesn't just protect you from what's outside. He protects you from what's inside. I know that sounds like something you'd read on a bumper sticker. I promise you, by the end of this story, you'll understand exactly what I mean. Koda had been at the Sullivan County shelter for 411 days. He'd been surrendered by his second owner. The first had raised him for hog hunting and gave him up when he moved to an apartment. The second kept him for 14 months and returned him after Koda bit a plumber who'd entered the house without knocking. The bite broke skin, 3 stitches on the forearm. The shelter report said, territorial, bite history, strong prey drive, not suitable for homes with small children or animals. 31 families looked at his intake sheet. 31 said no. The shelter posted him online 4 times. The comments were predictable. Dangerous breed. Why is this dog still alive? Some dogs just can't be saved. And here's what the comments didn't say, because the comments never say this part. Koda had been returned twice, locked in a kennel for 411 days, and he had not once, shown aggression to any person inside the shelter. He bit a stranger who entered a house unannounced. That's not aggression. That's a Dogo doing exactly what 100 years of breeding told him to do. But nobody reads it that way. Nobody looks at a 140-pound white dog with a bite record and thinks, he was doing his job. They think dangerous. And dangerous dogs sit in kennels for 411 days and get comments that ask why they're alive. The shelter volunteer who walked Koda was a 17-year-old girl named Avery who weighed 110 pounds and held his leash with one hand. Koda walked beside her at her pace. He never pulled. When other dogs barked at him from their kennels, he didn't react. He just kept walking, eyes forward, that slow, rolling gait. It's like nothing in the world could make him move faster than he'd decided to move. Avery said he was the calmest dog in the building. "He's not aggressive," she told everyone who'd listen. "He's just big and white and has a record, and people can't see past that." By month 13, Koda had stopped going to the front of his kennel when people walked by. He lay on the concrete slab in the back corner, chin on his paws, eyes open, watching nothing. His food intake dropped. He ate half his meals. Avery started sitting inside his kennel during her breaks, her back against the wall, reading homework. Koda would rest his head on her knee and close his eyes. He never fell asleep. He just rested there. It's in something that looked like peace but was probably closer to resignation. The quiet that comes when you've stopped believing the door is going to open for you. 212 miles south, in Keene, New Hampshire, the Moran family was coming apart in the way that families come apart after losing a child. Not with a crack, but with a settling. The way a house shifts on its foundation after an earthquake, and you can't see the damage, but every door sticks and every window is slightly harder to open. Ryan Moran was 43. He taught history at the high school. His wife, Claire, was 41, a physical therapist at the hospital. Their older son, Nolan, had been 14 when the accident happened. Their younger son, Emmett, was 9. Emmett stopped speaking the day Nolan died. Not gradually, completely. Like someone had reached inside him and unplugged the wire between his brain and his mouth. The pediatrician said his vocal cords were undamaged. The speech therapist said there was no physical obstruction. The child psychologist diagnosed selective mutism. Trauma-induced, grief-related. She said it was Emmett's way of controlling the one thing he could control in a world that had taken the most important person in it without asking. Claire understood this intellectually. She'd read the books. She'd sat in the sessions. She knew the terminology: elective silence as a trauma response, somatic shutdown, the body keeping the score. She knew that Emmett wasn't choosing silence to punish them. She knew it wasn't defiance. But knowing didn't make the house any less quiet. And the quiet in a house where a child has died is different from any other quiet in the world. It's not empty, it's full of the sounds that should be there and aren't. The footsteps on the stairs, and the voice calling from the bedroom, and the argument about whose turn it is to take out the trash, and the laugh that you didn't appreciate enough when it was happening because you thought it would always be there. Ryan handled the grief by moving. He cleaned the garage. He repainted Nolan's room. Claire couldn't go in there, but Ryan could. And he repainted it a different color because the old color was Nolan's choice, and looking at it was like looking at a decision his son would never make again. He mowed the lawn twice a week. He fixed things that weren't broken. And he stayed in motion because motion was the opposite of what the accident had done. The accident had stopped everything, and Ryan couldn't stop, because if he stopped, he'd have to sit with it, and he wasn't ready to sit with it. Claire handled the grief differently. She sat with it. She sat at the kitchen table at 5:30 a.m. with a cup of coffee that got cold before she finished it, and looked at the chair where Nolan used to sit, and she let the grief be there, in the chair, like a guest she couldn't ask to leave. She didn't cry every morning. Some mornings, she just sat. Some mornings, she talked to the chair. Some mornings, Emmett would come downstairs and see her sitting there, and he'd climb into her lap without a word, and they'd sit together, both of them silent, both of them looking at the empty chair. Ace and Claire would hold him and think, I have one son left, and he can't speak, and I can't make him, and I don't know how to fix this. It was Claire's sister, Megan, who found the shelter listing. Not because she was looking for a dog. She was browsing the shelter's Facebook page because she was thinking about getting a cat. She saw Koda's photo, white, huge, lying in the back of a kennel with his chin on the floor. She sent it to Claire with no message. Claire looked at it for a long time. He looks like he's waiting for something, Claire said to Ryan that night. He looks like he weighs more than Emmett, Ryan said. Meg thinks we should go see him. A Dogo Argentino with a bite history, and a 9-year-old who doesn't speak. Ryan, I'm not saying no, I'm saying it's a lot. They drove to the shelter on a Saturday. But Emmett sat in the back seat with his headphones on, looking out the window. He hadn't asked to go. He hadn't asked for anything in 7 months. 39 dogs, all barking. Emmett kept his headphones on. Claire held his hand. Ryan walked ahead, reading intake cards. They looked at a beagle. They looked at a lab mix. They were at the intake desk when Emmett took his headphones off. He was looking down the hallway. Last row, last kennel, the quiet one. Emmett let go of Claire's hand. He walked, not fast, not slow, just walked. The way you walk towards something you recognize before you understand why. Down the hallway, past every barking dog, to the last kennel on the left. Koda was in the back corner, chin on paws. He wasn't looking at the door. He'd stopped looking at the door months ago. Emmett crouched down. As he put both palms flat on the chain link, Koda's ear moved, then his head. He looked at Emmett. For 10 seconds, neither of them moved. Then Koda stood, slowly, all 140 pounds unfolding, and walked to the front of the kennel. He pressed his nose through the chain link and touched Emmett's fingers, cold and dry. Then he exhaled, one breath, long and warm, that hit Emmett's wrists and forearms. Emmett didn't speak, but he did something he hadn't done in 7 months. He smiled, small. A fracture in the silence, not a break. But Claire, standing 20 feet away, saw it. Her hand went to her mouth. Avery was beside her. "That's Koda," she said. "He hasn't gone to the front for anyone in 4 months." Ryan looked at the intake card. Bite history, not suitable for children. He looked at his son, crouched on the floor, just palms on the chain link, smiling for the first time since March. He looked at Claire, whose eyes were wet. Ryan signed the papers at 11:20 a.m. His hand hesitated over the line. He thought about the bite record and the 140 pounds and the 9-year-old who couldn't speak, and the house that was already too quiet and too full at the same time. He thought about what Claire had said. He looks like he's waiting for something. He thought about Emmett's smile. He signed. The first week was chaos. Koda knocked over a bookshelf with his tail. 8 books and a framed photo of Nolan hit the floor. Claire froze. Ryan picked up the photo. The glass was cracked. Nobody said anything. Koda stood in the middle of the room, looking at the mess with the expression of a dog who understood gravity, but not consequences. He ate a shoe. Ryan's left work shoe, the good pair, chewed to the sole. He stood in the hallway, and his body blocked it completely. He drank water so aggressively that the bowl slid across the kitchen floor and hit the dishwasher. But, with Emmett, Koda was something else, something nobody expected, and I need to describe it carefully because it's the center of everything that happens later. Koda followed Emmett, not the way dogs follow people, trotting behind, checking in, wandering off. Koda followed Emmett the way a shadow follows a body. Inches behind him, every step, every room, every moment. When Emmett sat on the couch, Koda lay at his feet with his body pressed against Emmett's shins. When Emmett went to his room, Koda lay across the doorway. When Emmett sat at the kitchen table for meals, eating silently, all staring at his plate, Koda sat beside his chair with his chin on Emmett's thigh, heavy and warm, 140 pounds of weight that said, "I'm here," without making a sound. The therapist, Dr. Adler, called it co-regulation. She said some animals, particularly breeds with high social sensitivity, could mirror a child's emotional state and provide a physical pressure that the nervous system interprets as safety. "His body against Emmett's body is doing what words can't right now," she said. "It's telling Emmett's nervous system that someone is there and that it's safe to come out." Claire noticed something in week 3. Emmett had started touching Koda differently, not petting, pressing. He'd press his forehead against Koda's neck and hold it there, the way you press your face into a pillow when you're trying not to cry. He'd wrap his arms around Koda's chest and squeeze. Koda didn't move. He just took the pressure, absorbed it, the way a wall absorbs a fist. He held still and let Emmett push everything he couldn't say into 140 pounds of white muscle. And the muscle held. The school counselor, Mrs. Chen, called Claire in week 4. "I need to tell you something. Emmett drew a picture today. It's the first time he's done anything in art class since March." The picture was a white dog lying on a bedroom floor. Next to the dog, a boy. Above them, in the sky, Emmett had drawn this part in blue crayon, careful, deliberate. A second boy, watching. He hadn't labeled the figures. He didn't need to. Claire held the picture at the kitchen table after Emmett went to bed. Her hands were shaking. Ryan sat across from her. Koda was on the floor between them, the chin on his paws. Claire said, "He drew Nolan in the sky." "I know." "He drew himself next to the dog." "I know." "He's starting to put it somewhere, Ryan. He's starting to put the grief somewhere that isn't inside his body." Ryan reached across the table and put his hand over Claire's. Koda's tail moved once, one sweep across the floor. Month 4. A Tuesday night in October. Claire was in bed. Ryan was in bed. Emmett was in his room. Koda was on the floor next to Emmett's bed. The way he was every night, his body stretched along the side of the mattress like a white barricade. 2:14 a.m. Claire's eyes opened. She didn't know why. The house was quiet. The full quiet. The kind she'd learned to live in. She lay there, listening. Then she heard it. A voice, thin, small, coming from down the hall. Emmett's room. Yeah, Claire got out of bed. She walked to the hallway. The door to Emmett's room was open. Emmett had started leaving it open since Koda, because Koda went in and out at night to check the house, and Emmett wanted the door open so Koda could come back. Claire stood in the hallway, 3 feet from the doorframe, and listened. Emmett was talking, not to Claire, not to Ryan, to Koda. He was lying on his side in bed, his hand hanging over the edge, resting on Koda's head. Koda was on the floor, chin up, eyes open, looking at Emmett, and Emmett was whispering. And then Nolan said the turtle was probably 100 years old, and I said no way, and he said yes way. Yeah, and we watched it go across the whole path, and it took like 10 minutes, and Nolan said if we were that slow, we'd never make it to school, and I said that would be awesome. He was finishing the story, the turtle story, the one he'd been telling Parker at school the day Nolan died, the story he'd stopped in the middle of 7 months ago and never finished. He was telling it to Koda at 2:14 in the morning, in the dark, in a whisper, because the dark was safe and the dog was safe, and Koda was the first thing in 7 months that Emmett's body trusted enough to open the door that his grief had locked shut. Claire slid down the hallway wall. She sat on the floor. She put her hand over her mouth. Her shoulders shook, but she didn't make a sound, because if Emmett heard her, he might stop, and she could not let him stop. And then Ryan found her there 20 minutes later. He came out of the bedroom and saw Claire on the floor, tears on her face, one hand over her mouth, the other pointing at Emmett's door. He listened. Emmett was still whispering. A different story now. One about Nolan teaching him to skip rocks at the lake. Ryan sat down next to Claire. He didn't touch her. He just sat. And they listened together to their son's voice filling the hallway for the first time in 7 months. Emmett didn't speak at breakfast the next morning. He didn't speak at school. He didn't speak at dinner. Claire didn't push. Dr. Adler had warned them. The voice may come back in pieces. Don't reach for it. Let it come. But that night, at 2 a.m., Emmett talked to Koda again. And the next night. And the next. Every night for 3 weeks. Emmett whispered stories about Nolan to a 140-pound dog on his bedroom floor. The dog who had a bite record and 411 days in a kennel and a breed the world said was dangerous. That dog lay on the floor every night and listened to a boy tell stories about his dead brother, and he didn't move and he didn't leave, and he held the space the way only a dog can hold space, which is completely without judgment, without advice, without trying to fix anything. He just listened. And that was the thing Emmett needed, not someone to fix the silence, someone to sit in it with him until he was ready to fill it himself. Week 6 after the first whisper. A Saturday morning. Claire was making pancakes. Ryan was at the table. Emmett came downstairs with Koda at his side. He sat at the table. Koda sat beside him, chin on his thigh. Emmett looked at Claire. He opened his mouth. His voice was rough, unused, rusty, like a hinge that hasn't moved in a long time. "Mom," he said, "can Koda have a pancake?" Claire turned around. The spatula was in her hand. Pancake batter dripped on the floor. She didn't look at the batter, she looked at her son. Her chin trembled once. She pressed her lips together and it stopped. "He can have 2, she said. Today Koda is 5, 142 pounds. Emmett is 11. He talks now, not as much as before, and not as loud. And sometimes he goes quiet for a day or 2, and Claire has learned not to panic when that happens, because the quiet isn't the old quiet. It's just a boy thinking. He tells people his dog is the biggest dog in New Hampshire, which isn't true, but nobody corrects him. He still talks to Koda at night, not whispers anymore, just talks, lying in bed, hand on Koda's head, telling him about his day the way you tell someone who's never going to interrupt you or tell you to hurry up or put a pillow over his face and say, 5 minutes, Emmett. Ryan stopped repainting rooms. He stopped mowing twice a week. One Saturday, Claire found him sitting in Nolan's room, the room he'd repainted, just sitting on the floor, looking at the wall. Koda was lying next to him. Ryan's hand was on the dog's back. He said, "I think I painted this the wrong color," Claire said. "What color should it be?" Ryan said, "The color it was." They repainted it together that weekend. Emmett helped. He didn't say much, but he held the roller. Dr. Adler has a photo on her desk. Emmett gave it to her. It's the drawing from art class. Yeah, the white dog on the floor, the boy next to the dog, the second boy in the sky. She shows it to other families sometimes. She doesn't explain it. She just lets them look. The shelter took Koda's intake card down the month after his adoption. Avery asked them to keep it. She tapes it to the inside of her locker at school. Territorial, bite history, not suitable for homes with small children. Under it, she wrote in Sharpie, "Gave a boy his voice back." Nolan's chair is still at the kitchen table. Nobody sits in it, but some mornings, Koda walks over and rests his chin on the seat for a few seconds before lying down at Emmett's feet. He does this almost every morning. Nobody taught him. Nobody asked. He just does it, puts his chin on the empty chair, holds it there, then moves on, like he's checking. Like he knows someone is supposed to be there. Like he's telling whoever it is, "I've got him. He's okay." He's talking again, and he is. Emmett is talking again. Not because anyone fixed him. Not because a therapist found the right word, or a doctor found the right pill, or time did the thing people say time does. Because a 140-pound dog with a bite record lay on his bedroom floor every night and listened to stories about a brother who died and didn't move and didn't leave and held the space until the boy was ready to walk out of it on his own. That's not something you can train. That's not something you can buy. That's a dog who sat in a kennel for 411 days because the world called him dangerous, and then lay on a boy's floor for 7 months because the boy called him Koda, and that was enough.